Now that Alaska is in the news, and it really is in the news, we did a few shows from Alaska a couple of years ago that have gotten all kinds of comments. In fact, people keep writing all the time asking if we will repeat those Alaska shows. This is the old, before the pipeline Alaska, and I was up there. And here are a couple of our great memorable Alaska shows. Memorable to me, and I hope to you.
Listen carefully to that sound. Just turn the gain up on your radio for a minute, and I'll let the sound just roar on, and I want you to turn up the gain. And if you have a good high-fidelity radio, I want you to turn up the treble a little bit, see that you get some kind of balance on it, and then just stand back and listen to this sound roar out of your loudspeaker. Just take a good listen to this. This is something you're not going to hear much these days. In fact, it's probably one of the great one of the great sounds for millions and millions of people who will never hear it. Just listen to this for a minute. I'm right now standing on the banks of the Mendenhall River. The sound you hear is the sound of the water rushing by over rapids, and it's one of the wildest, angriest, most dangerous-looking rivers I've ever seen anywhere in the world. And the Mendenhall River is a river that flows out of the Mendenhall Glacier, which is a tremendous glacier up here in Alaska. And by the way, for those of you who have no idea where the Mendenhall River is or where I am, right now I'm in Juneau, Alaska. And we arrived in Juneau last night, and all last night and all this morning and today I've been just going around this unbelievable place. You know, anything you've ever heard about Alaska, and I've heard a lot, like most Americans, is, if anything, a complete understatement. I was not at all prepared for what Alaska really is. And now, at last, after years of being a Robert Surface fan, I really understand what he was talking about when he talks about the lure of the North. This place really gets under your skin. Ever since I came to Juneau last night, and after working my way up the coast of Alaska, I stopped in several places, finally arrived up in Juneau, which is about halfway up the western shore of Alaska. If you have a map, you can get it out right now, and you can see right exactly where I am. Juneau is the capital of Alaska. It's about 13,000 people, and it's right nestled on the sea. And it's one of the most, well, it's difficult to even call it a scenic city, because it's more than scenery. It's one of the most peculiarly frightening and yet at the same time stunningly beautiful places I've ever seen in the world. Juneau is not the way I thought Juneau would be. Somehow I had an idea that these cities up here were, because I'd listened to too many people tell me this, that they were really just like ordinary American cities set amid mountains. This time of the year, in fact, quite a bit of the year, bears are a real problem with people who wander off the main streets of Juneau. They have a large brown bear population and some grizzlies in this area, and at this time of the year, when the salmon are spawning and running up these rivers, the bears come out of the interior and feed on the salmon. And anytime people get near these rivers, they're in danger of being mauled by a bear. And in fact, there are two people here in town right now that are in very serious condition from a problem that came about with a bear last week. So nobody goes into the wilderness here, and I'm right now standing in the wilderness. Incidentally, I'm right in the middle of a grove of evergreens right on the shore. There's nobody else around here, and nobody goes into this wilderness here without taking along with them a really good piece of firearms to protect himself against animals.
Now I'm in the middle of a rainforest, about 2 miles from the Mendenhall River, which we just left. And there's nothing around me but a
few people I'm with, and a vast mist that's hanging down over the mountains that ring this. And that tremendous explosion you heard was the sound of 2 or 3 people here in the wilderness who have set up targets, and they're firing their big game rifles. They're sighting in their telescopic sights, because this is the hunting season here. In this area, game is so extremely plentiful that deer in many places are considered a tremendous pest. The deer season is open now. If you've just tuned in and you wonder what the devil you're listening to, I am right now about 10 to 15 miles outside of Juneau, Alaska. I'm speaking quietly because I don't want to disturb the people who are in the woods here about to sight their rifles. And a man who's firing a big game rifle is even more touchy about talk than a golfer is. And they're picking up their targets. We're about to take off to go to another spot outside of Juneau here. The rain has dropped off a bit, and in just a few moments, when we get back into our rover, we're using a Land Rover out here in the woods. We're going to drive up to a Waterfall, which they tell me is one of the great waterfalls of the world, or at least one of the wildest ones. That's the sound of a big game rifle being fired right here in the heart of Alaska. They've begun firing again. And there's 2 or 3 men now just about to fire. They're calling their targets now, which are set maybe 150, 200 yards away at different distances. Hello. You can also hear our camera crew in the background getting their equipment ready to record this scene on videotape. Well, there it goes. If you've ever wondered what the wilderness sounds like, you're hearing a little bit of it right now. The next time I come back, which should be just in a second or two, because what I'm doing is going all over this area and doing brief segments of brief impressions of things that I see and hear in Juneau. The men are now walking down to check their targets, and for those of you who think of guns as essentially a useless thing, up here in Alaska, whether people like it or not, a gun is as much a part of their lives as, say, back home in town, a beer can opener. And it's an extremely, and I personally have always been anti-gun and am, but up here it's impossible to say that, because a gun is a very necessary thing for many of the people who live in this area, and not only just to hunt and provide the meat for the table. And by the way, that's a whole subject. The cost of living up here is fantastic compared to down in the States. Meat, dairy products, produce, anything like that is tremendously expensive. So up here, the fact that a man can go out and bag a deer or 2 in the year and put it away in the freezer is a definite economic necessity for many of the people living up here. The time is now 1.5 minutes, or about, it's about 1.5 minutes till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm a little out of breath because I just came up this long, steep hill right here in the middle of town in Juneau. And the reason that the time is important is because in about a minute, almost exactly a minute, you'll hear one of the most characteristic sounds of Juneau. Saturday afternoon here, and I'm standing right on the edge of the main street here in town, back of the Baranov Hotel, which is a hotel named after one of the early Russians that was here back in the days when Alaska was a Russian territory. You can probably hear the sound of a seaplane flying overhead. I'll hold the microphone up so you can hear it. This is a very typical Juneau sound. Yeah, there he goes. It's a Cessna 180 with floats. And everywhere here in Alaska, float planes are well, they're just about like sparrows in Central Park. There are thousands of them. Well, we have just about 10 seconds before the sound begins. The sound that I was telling you about. That is a typical sound of this town. That's a truck going by. Actually, a Volkswagen. That's not the sound that you're about to hear. There he's climbing up a hill with it. Cars really take a beating here in this town. And, in fact, one of the big problems, it's hard to believe when you first come into town, but one of the absolute big problems here is the problem of parking. We're very, very tough on parking. In fact, everybody here in town rents a space on the street. And anybody who's got a parking place is doggone lucky here in Juneau. It's not that there are that many cars, it's that the streets all run up and down, straight up in the air. And the actual amount of space that's available for parking is very small compared to the number of cars that are looking for it. It's raining very slightly, as it often does here in Juneau. There it goes. It's exactly 3 o'clock. Every day at this time here in Juneau, that sound rings out over the town. It's the sound of the Carillons. This is the way it sounds at 3 o'clock every afternoon in Juneau, Alaska. These carillons are... This set of carillon is up in the mountain, one of the mountains that rises sheer, straight up in the air, just off the main street of town. And you could hear the sound of those kids hollering in the background. They're little Indian kids playing on the street right next to me here. And there goes a family pickup truck roaring by. The pickup truck is probably the most... It's the typical family car here in Alaska. This is really a unbelievable sight, this town. You can't believe it at first. And right now I'm standing here on the corner of 2nd Street and Gold Street. All the streets and side streets in town are named after typical Alaskan things like Glacier Street, Bonanza Street, streets like Frontier Avenue. And above me, the clouds are clinging to the sides of the sheer cliffs of the mountains, and you can see a waterfall coming down off in the distance, a sheer drop of about 300 or 400 feet. That's the way Juneau sounds on a quiet Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock with all the shoppers in from the outlying districts in here buying their provisions for the week to come, and a slight, very pleasant rain falling. It's a strange, gray, misty, almost a fairyland kind of day. These clouds have a curious fairyland quality about them as they hang over the town. You can almost reach up and touch them. This is really poetic country up here. It's funny, all the things I'd heard about Alaska, I wasn't prepared for the curious, sentimental, kind of soft, poetic air that hangs over everything up here. I want you to turn up your radio again. The sound you're hearing is a sound that not many people have heard, statistically speaking anyway. This is the sound of a waterfall, a tremendous, angry, enormously powerful waterfall called the Ebener Falls, E-B-E-N-E-R, Ebener Falls, which comes pouring down out of Pacific Coast Range, out of the mountains that loom over Juneau. This waterfall, well, we've just hiked up a trail called Perseverance Trail, which is a long, winding trail that winds up the mountain. It goes up about 3,000 feet and something like a mile and a half, so you can figure out what kind of a hike it was. And the site that we got up here when we got up to the top was not only worth the hike, but worth 50 hikes like it. I'll let you hear the sound of these fantastic falls. I'm standing over them right now, about 10 feet from these rushing waters. The sun has just come out, and the camera crew is flipping because all day the weather has been gray and overcast, as it often is here in Juneau. And just this instant, as we set up our color tape camera overlooking the falls, just this instant, the sun came out and the mist from the falls is hanging over us now. It's a beautiful sight. It's like some kind of an unbelievable rainbow. This country here is, I've traveled all over the world, and this country, Alaska, absolutely has to be, well, I've said about other places, but I have to rescind everything I've ever said, because this country has to be some of the absolutely most beautiful country in the world, anywhere. There's a wild, almost a violent quality about it that just doesn't stop, and it's so exciting. That's the one thing that hits everybody. Certainly hit me and the camera crew that came up with me. These are blasé, hard-bitten TV tape video men who've seen everything, and suddenly when yeah, thank you. Very good. Oh boy, I'll hold this just in time for the bear to come, huh? They love this. Thank you, Denny. The guy just handed me a sprig of wild blueberries, which grow up here on the tops of these mountains. And that makes this country very dangerous for bears right around this area. They said that you shouldn't show up here if you don't have firearms. This is nothing like the kind of sight that you're used to when you think of classical waterfalls of the Niagara Falls variety. This is a wild, remote, cascading stream. It's not more than about, I would say, roughly 40 feet across, something like that. The water is an icy blue, and I picked the word ice because it is very apt here, because this water is water that comes from the melting snows atop these mountains, and it's literally melted ice water. It's terribly cold, and it's just above freezing, and it's plunging down over these rocks. There'd be no conceivable way a human being could get on this series of falls. One of the guides told me that last year two people were trying to photograph the falls right at this point, and one began to slip, and the other tried to reach out and grab him, and the next thing you know, both of them went in, and they dropped something like 1,000 feet down over these cascading falls, over the rocks and down through the gorge, before their bodies came to rest in a pool, and it was all over in seconds for them. This is a very dangerous country. That's one of the things I think that hits you. People like myself and most of us who are used to urban life just aren't prepared for the kind of exotic, natural danger that is always present up here in Alaska. I've read so much about Alaska's boom as far as its industries and so forth are concerned. That's all true. But Alaska seems to be that is the civilization of Alaska seems to be a very thin veneer that just runs along the coast and is very spotty. And inland, there are vast areas of this enormous country where very few people of any color have ever set foot. And this part of the country right here, this Juneau area, is just almost an there's no way in words to express it thing. I've always wanted to come to Alaska. I think almost every man who's ever read Jack London or who's ever run into Robert's service has felt that little sneaking desire to come up here, and it's a kind of a culmination with me of a lifelong dream to be up here. The nightlife in Juneau is just fantastic. I mean, if you come to Juneau, if you decide to ever come up here, write down the Red Dog Saloon. Just write that name down, because Ty Tyson and the crowd at the Red Dog Saloon, you'll understand why people come up here and never come back. There's an atmosphere of, this is the place where one of the guys said last night at the bar, he says, well, you see, what Alaska is, he says, it's a place where women are women and men are after them. And there's a lot of truth to this. This is a country for a man up here. If you love flying, if you love the land, if you like to look at the sky and you like to breathe air, and you like to stand next to water that is the color of the most magnificent sapphire, Dad, you've got to come to Alaska. You just have to do it before you die. You know the old slogan, see Naples and die. Well, I saw Naples, and all I thought was at the time was, so what? But this is all the world's got to offer. Let's turn the other switch, see what happens on the other side. But this country, you can honestly really say that. There was a group of Japanese tourists we ran into here about an hour ago who were struggling up to the face of the Mendenhall Glacier, and they had looks on their faces like they were seeing something that they had only hoped to see in a fine Japanese painting and never see in life. But here it is. I love to listen to the sound of this water. So if you'll turn your gain up a little bit, I'd just like to let this sound roar out at you. If you have just tuned in and don't know what you're listening to, this is Gene Shepard up in Juneau, Alaska. And I'm carrying a tape recorder around, and I'm just recording impressions as I see them. I'm not attempting to make any continuity of the show, nor am I attempting to do a documentary on Juneau. I'm just giving you my impressions of this fantastic land. I just want to give you an idea what the natural sounds of this land are like. So if you've just tuned in, I'll explain. I'm standing right on a rock overlooking a swirling cascade, roaring torrential gorge of the Ebener Falls, which is pouring down some 4,000 feet down towards the sea in Juneau. The time right now, Alaskan time, is about 6:15 p.m. The sun has just come out for the first time today, and it's just a magnificent day here. I just can't tell you what a magnificent day. The temperature now stands at about 55 degrees. There's a crisp air, and all around me is this rising rainforest. Well, this is Big Daddy here. This is the old sourdough. Speaking of the word sourdough, last night a miner, I met a miner in the bar there, and he said, you know why they call it sourdough? And I said, no, why do they call it sourdough? He said, well, they call us sourdoughs because we're sour on Alaska, and we ain't got the dough to leave it. That's why they call us sourdoughs. So that's it, friends. This is the old sourdough signing off from Ebener Falls. In a couple of seconds, I'm going to take my surfboard down and just see how far Big Daddy can go. Here we go!